I've been saying that for weeks. Reparations is a matter of international law. It's one that even Israel recognizes, by the way. That's the craziest part.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. This is Democracy Now!
Omer Bartov on contested slogan and why the two-state solution is not viable. I love that this is literally what we talked about, me and Ethan.
Democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We return to Omer Bartov, professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown University. The Israeli-American scholar has been described by the U.S. Holocaust Museum as one of the world's leading specialists on genocide. He spoke to us on Wednesday, one day after the House voted to censure Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian-American member of Congress, for her criticism of Israel. Professor Bartov, you are a professor at Brown University in Providence. You're in Cambridge right now. And I wanted to ask you about the dissent on college campuses and how they're being...
I remember when you said 4 weeks ago, wow, I still don't know about Channel 4. No, I mean, I remember talking about Channel 4 when they did the Russell Brand coverage as well. Every time we watch Channel 4, I always still assume, because it's British media, that it'll be bad. It's hard for me to ever look at British outlets that aren't Double Down News or Novara and think, oh, they're going to be good. It's just impossible for me to see it from that light.
Being dealt with. In Cambridge at Harvard, you know about the students who were protesting on behalf of Palestinian rights. A truck carries around their faces, and above their faces it says anti-Semite. And on television, you'll see pieces on anti-Semitism, which is very real in the world. For example, the burning of the Austrian cemetery in Vienna. And many other situations. But they will be blended together. This is on the mainstream networks with images of people protesting holding a Palestinian flag. Can you talk about what's happening on college campuses and people fearing that their concern for justice is being translated as anti-Semitism and cause for them to be blacklisted?
So look, this is a very complex issue. I agree. I think part of it is, frankly, ignorance about the reality on the ground in Israel-Palestine. And that has to do, obviously, not with your show, but with much of how the mainstream media in the United States is presenting things. But also, young people, students, can find other sources of information to better know what is happening on the ground. So generally, I think there's a little bit of issue of information. Anti-Semitism is real, as you say, and has been growing, and is a not just lamentable but frightening phenomenon. And I obviously have no sympathy with it. But there is, and there has been for a long time, a tendency to label any criticism of the state of Israel, any criticism of the policies of any particular government, let alone criticism of Israel as a state as such, as anti-Semitism. And that is a policy of the right wing in Israel, and that's a policy of the right wing in this country, and it has nothing to do with the truth. One can be a Zionist or a non-Zionist or an anti-Zionist and not be anti-Semitic. One can be...
I think that straight up, a lot of older Zionists, both Christian and Jewish, do not realize what the younger generation looks like and how they, like, what kind of perspectives they've grown with, especially as it pertains to like Israel's actions and a diversity of platforms that they can get on the ground information from. And I think that they're like not able to figure this out. They can't like comprehend that. I think the propaganda has to be very different now for the younger audiences, and they've grown comfortable with the majority of people that actually vote and actually, I guess, go out and and do things or are leading organizations and whatnot, being uncritically and unconditionally pro-Israel. So they've forgotten how to propaganda towards a younger audience, and that's part of the reason why they're just like now using whatever existing mechanisms of power that they can to just squash it. Rather than addressing the issue head on, they're literally being like, oh, we have martial law here in Israel. You should also implement some kind of form of that as well in America to the best of your ability. And while some pieces of shit will go along with that, it's still America at the end of the day. And I think that, people will respond in the exact opposite way once they are told that they can't say these sorts of things.
And against Zionists, but against particular Israeli policies, I very strongly support the existence of the State of Israel, and I'm highly critical of its policies. And some people would call me a self-hating Jew. But that is nonsense. That has to do with criticism of policies that not only function as oppression of Palestinians over a very long period of time, 56 years of occupation of Palestinians, a refusal by the Israeli government to ever talk about what happened in 1948. So this kind of shutting up the entire conversation, and at the same time, a belief that Jews, like other nations, have a right of self-determination. So we have to separate the two. I think that at the moment, in the demonstrations, there is a sort of heightening of passions. And in part, it is because...
What would be a good strategy to change the mindset? Israeli Jews about the slogan? Wait, what? Israeli Jews? You mean just Jewish people in America? Because I don't think you'll change Israeli people's minds about this slogan. And Israeli people's minds about the slogan doesn't even matter. Slogan that is in English in the Western world for those who are defending the dignity and humanity, the dignity and humanity of Palestinians. The goal here is to basically make any calls, whatever calls you can for the emancipation of Palestinians, right? That's it.
Because of the policies of the Israeli government. I do feel that when people march in support of Palestinian lives, and I'm very much in favor of that, one does also have to remember what happened on October 7th. On October 7th, over 1,000 Jewish civilians, Israeli Jewish civilians, there were actually some Arabs there too, some Bedouin who lived there too, were butchered in the most heinous manner. And this was live streamed. This has been deeply wounding to Israeli society. Almost every person in Israel knows people who were killed there or kidnapped, including myself, members of my own family who were either killed or are now in Gaza. And one has to recall that there are 240 people now held as hostages. And so I think that when one protests the policies of Israel, for the sake of, and this has to do also with what Representative Talib said, which I completely agree with. I thought it was a very moving speech, but I think it's important to also stress that other side. There has been a dehumanization of both sides. Occupation dehumanizes people. It dehumanizes the occupier and it dehumanizes the occupied. And the way to deal with this is to talk about the political future.
Listen, many of you will look to this and go, wow, I don't give a fuck what the Israelis think. Discounting the notion that the guy who's saying it is literally an Israeli Jew who is directly related to who has been directly victimized by October 7th. And he still demonstrates the moral clarity that you've never had to face in your entire life. Sorry, that's just the truth. Okay? Many of you have never had to deal with such a thing. Okay? There are some Palestinians in the chat, of course, who have, and they are often some of the most charitable people I've ever met in my entire life. So, behave with your anger. Tensions might rise in this moment, but You need allies from every walks of life, because it is true. Wait, people are shitting on even this guy? No, they're not at all. No, they're not. I'm simply stating that, like, he's openly stating the pain that he has experienced and the dehumanization happening on both sides, which I think it's a valid fucking thing to say, especially considering who he is, what his background is, what he's done, as far as like what his work looks like. This for a lot longer than many chatters have even known what fucking Palestine even is. You know?
Do we move forward? A ceasefire would be wonderful, and I'm very much in support of it, but it won't put an end to the violence. The end to the violence will come only as a result of a peaceful resolution of this 100-year-old conflict, which has caused so much blood. That is, I think, what we should try to push the American administration to do, to change its policies, to put pressure on the Israeli government to finally relent and to begin again negotiations with the Palestinians.
And let me ask you about the term "from the river to the sea," which the Israeli government takes, and those who charge others with anti-Semitism say it means the annihilation of the Jewish population of Israel. I'm looking at the Likud party platform of March 1977, the right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, which is the land of Israel. And it says the right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is eternal and indisputable, and is linked with the right to security and peace. Therefore, Judea and Samaria will not be handed to any foreign administration between the sea and the Jordan. There will only be Israeli sovereignty. That's between the sea and the Jordan River, between the river and the sea. Can you talk about that term?
Yes, you know, the originators of the Likud party, the revisionist part of Zionism, under the great leader Jabotinsky, had a song that they used to sing, and the song was, "The Jordan has two banks. This one belongs to us, and the other one too." That is, they were not only talking actually about so-called historical Palestine, which is mandatory Palestine of the interwar period. They were actually talking also about parts of the Jordan, of what is now the Kingdom of Jordan. As
Transjordan is what he's talking about. The original formation came from, I think, the Irgun brigades, which their original like the logo literally features Israel proper, Gaza, the West Bank, and even part of Jordan, Transjordan. Yes.
Belonging to the future Jewish state. So when we talk about from the Jordan to the sea, we are talking about the territory that is now controlled by Israel. In that territory, there are now 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians. 2 million Palestinians.
Oh, that's the logo. What? Okay, dude. Yeah, see?
Palestinians were Israeli citizens, 3 million Palestinians were in the West Bank, and 2 to 2.5 million Palestinians. Most of the population of Gaza are refugees in Gaza. So it's 7 million versus 7 million. To talk about a Palestinian state or a Jewish state between the Jordan and the sea, the question, of course, arises: so what will happen to the other half? That is really the question. If one talks about a Palestinian state that refuses to recognize the Jewish right of self-determination, that is, of the right of Jews to have a state of their own, the question is, what would happen to the Jews there? Would they go back to Europe, as some people say, whatever that actually means? And if you have a state the way the Israeli right, the Likud party, and now the much more radical, really Jewish supremacist elements in Netanyahu's government, the Smotrich and Ben Gvir, these people who sort of trace their roots back to Rabbi Kahana, who are really Nazis, if you ask yourself, what do they mean? They want to create a Jewish state that does not have Palestinians in it, no Arabs in it, And the policy has been consistently to make
no Arabs except, Arab Jews, because that's Itamar Ben-Gvir is an Arab Jew. Remember, I know he knows the distinction. It's just that, like, it's wild that it's always weird whenever I talk about this from the perspective of an American or a Turkish American, whatever, right? When I look at it from the outside, if you're unfamiliar with the details and you're looking at the situation from the outside, you're like, oh, okay, like, so Jews versus Arabs. Okay, got it. And it's like, you don't even understand. Like, there are millions of Arab Jews. It's ridiculous. This designation inherently is fucking silly and racist or supremacist. It's not that interesting. Play the vid. Suck my dick. Tlaib is against getting rid of the settlers in the West Bank. What do you think of that? Wait, what do you mean? I agree with that. That's why I believe in a one-state solution. What the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, hello. That every one-stater now will unironically tell you the exact same fucking perspective that, like, many of which were originally two-state solutionists, myself included, and have basically realized that it's impossible. It's impossible given the circumstances with 400,000 plus Israeli Jews living in the West Bank.
Make life as unbearable for the Palestinians there, so that either they will finally move out.
How could you agree with them keeping stolen land? Dude, what are you talking about, brother? What do you think a two-state solution is? Like, shut the fuck up. Just shut up. Just read anything on the matter, dude. Just read the goddamn charter, the PFLP charter from 1964. You think these motherfuckers haven't thought this through before you? The fuck? I'm Palestinian? Okay, then you should know better. You should know better than everyone else in this fucking chat. What do you mean? What is he saying? We're not gonna move on to Spider-Man yet. He's like, hey guys, I'm Palestinian and I think that we should be fucking killing all of the Israelis. Is that what you're gonna say? Oh, dude, yeah, of course you need reparations, man. Okay, shut the fuck up. Everybody agrees with that. That's ridiculous. Okay, Uncle Zaza, I've never brought that forward as a thing. Okay, then there you go. I've been saying that for weeks. Reparations is a matter of international law. It's one that even Israel recognizes, by the way. That's the craziest part. Because here's the thing. Here's two things that Israel recognizes that show the severity of the situation. One, 750,000 Palestinians were expelled. They'll say, oh, well, was that by force? Was that because they were asking for it? Was that because they thought maybe they could just like go on a trip to the hammam and then come back maybe later, but then they were, oopsie, not allowed back for some weird reason? Like, doesn't matter. They still recognize that happened. The other thing that they recognize is under international law, reparations must be given to the Palestinians for the wrongdoing, for the fact that they were, pushed away from their homes and never allowed to return. Now, Israel also recognizes that, but then we'll turn around and go, well, maybe Arabs should also pay some of the reparations. Like, it's a very gross idea, because it's like, why should the Arabs pay for reparations? Because like they deserve their share of the responsibility for the refugee crisis, because they lied to the Palestinians and told them they could escape and then be able to return, you know? Yeah. Israel did offer reparations to Oslo and Camp David. It was for Palestinians that would accept not returning and would stay in Lebanon or Egypt. Yeah.
Which they have no intention of doing, or to use an emergency situation such as exists right now.
It is pretty funny, though, to like constantly have this back and forth with people who are just like, actually, I don't care. Like, Palestinians are not human. They're bloodthirsty. They're monsters. They do not have any fucking rights. Why? Because I watched a Ben Shapiro video. Why? Because I watched a PragerU video. And then you have literally like Israeli Holocaust scholars who are very openly just being like, yeah, dog, everything you have learned from PragerU is entirely incorrect. Here's what's actually going on. And it is virtually impossible to avoid this information. And for some fucking reason, so many motherfuckers avoid it harder than the top of the hour ad break, which is, by the way, 15 minutes early, okay? I went on a rant and I wanted to fucking pop off with one segue, so I'm going to do it right now. 15 minutes early, suck my dick. I don't care. Here's a 3-minute ad break now. it shouldn't be seen as Israel should pay less reparations because other nations should also pay reparations. It means they should all pay a lot more together, you know? No, they literally fucking use that in contest as an effort to like push the reparation conversation aside. Why? Because that would require taking ownership over the Nakba. And the official position is that maybe it didn't happen, but if it did, it was actually kind of good and should happen again. And oops, we're doing the Nakba again right now, as you can see right in front of your eyes. That's like literally the official Israeli position. So the Israeli government's position is like, we don't know. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but like it'd be pretty cool if it happened. And also maybe it should happen again. Who knows? So that's part of the reason why they can avoid paying reparations, because like they don't have to, because it's like they don't have to accept blame for it. They don't want to accept blame for
under
it.
the cover of which they could be ethnically cleansed. And that's a major worry now among Palestinians who are Israeli citizens, who are worried about a second Nakba, a second expulsion of Palestinians after 1948, something that has been mentioned by a number of Israeli politicians, and of course a major worry in the West Bank and in Gaza. So what we need to think of is not the term from the Jordan to the sea, which is the territory that Israel now controls, but how does that territory get to be shared by these two groups in ways that do not include oppression, lack of any rights, lack of equality, and certainly does not include violence and expulsion.
And finally, Professor Omer Bartov, the issue of a two-state solution or one.
Do you think anything needs to be said about the Arab countries which Mizrahi Jews came from? Bro, straight up, I think that the Arab countries that expelled their own Jews, okay, and sent them to Israel, unless the Jews went on their own volition, because many did. Like, that's the other difference. Like, people say it's like a Trail of Tears type situation. Like, some of them did fucking leave because they were worried about pogroms. Some of them were harmed and harassed. And some of the Jews were like, yeah, I want to go to Israel. Israel seems fucking sick. Like, the majority, I mean, it's a bit column A, bit column B. Palestinians had nowhere to go. They weren't like, oh shit, dude, I would love to fucking, here, I'm going to take my fucking house key with me and the deed to the home and like whatever I can grab really quickly, because there's like gunfire happening outside and people telling me that they're going to come and rape me and kill me. Okay? It's very different than like anti-Semitism increasing in Arab nations as a consequence of Arab nationalism, especially tense during the inception of the Israeli nation state. And then people moving throughout time. But the reality is, I don't think a lot of those guys would go back to Morocco, for example. I don't think they would.
State solution, if you could take that on in a nutshell.
Yes, so, you know, I used to be a strong supporter of the two-state solution, and I gradually realized that this was a sort of fig leaf of the Israeli left while the country kept settling the West Bank and making it impossible to create an independent Palestinian state there. And we kept saying, well, but at the end, there will be a two-state solution. So the traditional two-state solution, to my mind, is no longer viable. So what is viable? And I think, and I belong to a group of people who've been talking about it for quite a while, that the only solution is a confederation, which would mean that there would be two states. There would be a Jewish state and a Palestinian state. They both would have full sovereignty, and they would be along more or less the borders of 1967, the Green Line, so-called, but they would make a distinction between residency and citizenship, so that people, say Jews who live in a Palestinian state, could remain Israeli citizens who have rights of residency in a Palestinian state, but have to then adhere to all the laws, rules, and regulations of that Palestinian state. And Palestinians who live, say, in Nablus and would like to live in Haifa, like a Frenchman from Paris who would like to live in Berlin, could move to Haifa, and they could have rights of residency, but they'd have to conform to all the rules and regulations of the Israeli state, but they would vote to a Palestinian parliament. And Jerusalem would be the joint capital of both. And above that, there would be institutions that would take care of the mutual affairs of these two states, which are very tightly woven together now.
Bro, I don't even like this. I feel like maybe it's I feel like it's a step in the right direction, certainly. But then you have like Lebanon. You know what I mean? It's certainly it just turns into like a worse version of Lebanon.
By their infrastructure, electricity, water, and so forth, it's really impossible to cut them apart. That is right now, of course, sounds like a pipe dream, but I think that in the long run, that is probably the only viable solution. And I'll add one last thing to that, which is very important both to Jews and Palestinians, which is that both states would have the right of return. The Jews could say, as they say now, that Jews who want to become Israeli citizens wherever they live can come. And Palestinians in the Palestinian state could say all Palestinian refugees.
Who would rule of one state? Israelis or Palestinians or neither? I mean, I think this is what he's describing is the most common, like when you get down to the weeds of it, I've heard what he's describing as like the most common, most possible, most reasonable, albeit a little tempered, one state solution that creates like two specific states that coexist alongside one another, but under the same banner. It's still a singular state, but there's two separate formations of governance, not like North and South Korea. No, North and South Korea is two states. That's different. This is the single binational state idea. I think the solution is that Israel will still dominate economically and Palestinians will earn way too less. Wait, what? Right to return for Jews in diaspora? What the fuck? So every other country in the world would need to allow right for return for Americans to return to Europe? This is ridiculous. That's the funniest thing to get mad at. Brother, that already exists. What are you talking about? Also, there's not that many Jews on the planet, chatter. Like, you know this taps out at 16 million, right? Like, even if Israel gave a right to return to every single Jewish person, which it does, like, you know, you're maxing out at 16 mil. How do you think got double citizenship? Exactly, dual citizenship. I didn't even know that Ethan was an Israeli citizen. I thought he just like went to birthright and stuff. I didn't realize he was like literally. I know he lived there, but I didn't know he was a citizen. I did. You're a fake friend. Yeah. 60 mil? Do you mean like people from Russia and Poland return to Palestine? No, 16. The total number of Jewish people on the planet is 16 million. The same number of Jewish people that existed on the planet before the Holocaust. Okay? Only recently did the Jewish population recover, the global international Jewish population recover back to the number it was at before the Holocaust. Okay? This is important to understand because it also helps, I think, a lot of people understand the fears that Jewish people have. Okay? Like that it's not an unreasonable fear to have. I know a lot about Jewish history because I'm an anti-fascist. So you kind of have to learn a lot about Jewish history. One, because like, you know, some of my favorite revolutionary figures are Jews. Jews have been at the forefront of revolution and at the forefront of social causes, like championing social advocacy for a very long time. But one thing that you do learn when you learn at least a little bit about Jewish history is that, yeah, there's a reason why a lot of Jewish people are afraid. And I feel like maybe I should stress this a little bit more for people who sometimes cast aside anti-Semitism, because like Jews in America are foreseen as white. And they are. Ashkenazi Jews are white. And in America, they have been whiteified. Does that make sense? Until they're not, if that makes sense. But because they're white, like because they are considered under the banner of white, anglicizes the term. Thank you. They still have conditional whiteness. Yes, exactly. But because they've been anglicized in a weird way, one, they're not seen as like a marginalized. They're not seen as a marginalized community by some. Like people will be quick to compare them to Italians or the Irish or any number of other different ethnic backgrounds that live in the United States to say like, oh, dude, your fucking problems are no different than like Greeks, for example. And no, there is a difference there, in my opinion. I don't think that the anti-Semitism that Jewish people have withstood in the United States of America or historically is not the same as like Italians getting shit on in America and then becoming whiteified. Okay? So yeah, us Jews have been considered white since America decided to join World War II. That's a funny way to think about it, but yeah, basically, because they are whiteified, which is a word. Okay. What is this? North End restaurant owners claim they face discrimination for being white Italians and amended lawsuit over outdoor fees. Hasan is Jewish, okay? Before you guys think that he's actually advocating for Italian rights in here, he's making a joke. Okay? He said Jews have never had to face anything like this. True. This level of discrimination is, you're right. I take it back. Anti-Semitism is a real problem, but like nobody recognizes Italiophobia. Anyway, the point I was trying to make originally is that because Jewish people in America are seen as like white, that a lot of people don't listen when they say like anti-Semitism is a problem, and people cast that fear aside and go, whatever, dude, fuck off. But it is. Anti-Semitism is not a problem simply for Jews either. That's why I, always talk about anti-Semitism regularly and will continue to talk about it, not because it's just like another form of bigotry, but it's also a form of bigotry that shows that someone is very likely, teetering on the edges of fascism. Okay? There's never been 30K Americans marching in Madison Square Garden against people of Carbonara, Lamau. Yeah. And birthright isn't available to all Jews either, by the way. Wait, really? Does anyone mention Palestinians are technologically descendants of the original Jews? Yes, all the time. What do you mean technology? I think you meant technically, but yes, literally everyone all the time in perpetuity. Literally nonstop. It's very common. It is a very common sentiment that yes, the Palestinians technically are the original Jews. They just are no longer Jewish. Many of which have just like converted. They just kind of stayed there. A lot. Yeah, no, literally. I mean, but that's how it works. Yes.
Refugees who would like to come back to Palestine could come and become Palestinian citizens, and under certain rules could also move to the Israeli part of so-called.
It's not common for Zionists to agree with that. Yeah, I know, because Zionism is racist. I don't know how to describe it. The modern iteration of Zionism is a fascist, racist, a Jewish supremacist ideal. That's why. Yes, exactly. That is precisely the point. That's precisely the reason why they're like, oh, no way. Palestinians are not fucking descendants of the original Jews. Like, how dare you say that? There's also a reason, dude, this is why I brought up the distinction of Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews in comparison to Ashkenazi Jews. Like, there's a reason why there is a different designation for Arabs who are Jewish than Arabs who are Christian and Arabs who are Muslim. Arabs who are Christian and Muslim are considered Arab. Arabs who are Jewish are not considered Arab. They're considered Jews.
With mandatory Palestine as residents.
And why not simply a one-state solution?
I think a one-state solution is something that neither one side nor the other wants, because the Palestinians quite rightly want the right of self-determination, want to have their own state, as do the Jews. And both sides are afraid that the other side would be more powerful. Obviously, right now, under current conditions, the state of Israel is much more powerful militarily, economically, than the Palestinian part of of the land. And so in that sense, a one-state solution would actually perpetuate Jewish supremacy in the whole country.
Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like...
Palestinian here, this is pure projection. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with him.